The best carbon removal system we have out there right now, commercially available, meaning the farthest along, is probably Climeworks. They're pulling down 4,000 tons a year right now. We need to be pulling down 2 to 10 billion tons a year by 2030, according to the UN. So way off mark.
We're a few orders of magnitude behind.
Yeah.
The Rational View is a weekly series hosted by me, Dr. Alan Scott, providing a rational, evidence-based perspective on important societal issues.
Produced by Soapbox Media.
The world needs evidence-based public policy now more than ever. Making the right decisions should not be partisan politics. Please help spread The Rational View by going to patron.podbean.com/The Rational View. Together, we can make a better future. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Rational View. In this episode, I'm interviewing an entrepreneur who is trying to play a big part in slowing the acceleration of climate change. She is co-founder of an Xprize team trying to capture CO2 from the air. Long story short, their technology claims to be able to remove massive amounts of carbon from the atmosphere and convert it into hydrogen, biochar, and other environmentally friendly solutions. If you're listening to me for the first time, or if you're a longtime listener, please hit like on your podcast app. I'd love to hear from you and helps spread the word on The Rational View. And come join us on my Facebook group, The Rational View. Our guest today is Beth McDaniel, co-founder and president of the award-winning paint and coatings company Reactive Surfaces, where she also serves as legal counsel. She's also a partner in McDaniel and Associates, a law firm specializing in patent and trade secret law. As a serial entrepreneur, she has guided this bleeding-edge innovation company operating in the paint and coatings and specialty chemicals industries for the past 15 years. She has served in leadership roles for numerous organizations, including serving as a Pathways to Peace Fellow, a premier social justice organization. Her work in the area of human rights and social justice brings a level of experience and intention to ensure that any climate solution has at its heart environmental justice and enhancement of human rights and personal livelihood. She brings the same dedication to her family, including her 2 children and grandchildren. Beth, welcome to The Rational View.
Hi, Al. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. You have a very exciting and interesting background here. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? You seem to be involved in a lot of really cool projects, from human rights to social justice to climate change mitigation. How did you come to be in all of these different ideas?
Yes. Just through time, once you get to be in your 50s, you've just done a lot. Okay. But they were very important parts of my past that I wanted to highlight because they've definitely come together in this pursuit now for a carbon removal technology that could really be effective. I went to University of Texas for college and studied finance. My family was always in business. My dad was also a chemist, and he was very sciencey in the petrochemical area of Houston. And none of his kids were scientists, and to his chagrin. But he did study business, and he always had businesses on the side. One of which happened to be a paint company that they bought that sent me through college, and I ended up in the paint business. So you never know. Paint was never anything that we were really involved in, but for a minute in time, but it might have been, some sort of premonition for my future. I don't know. Then I went to law school and studied just to be a business lawyer. And after that, I started, we have some entrepreneurs in our family, and my brother is a serial entrepreneur, and he had, and especially in real estate at the time. And so he called me up and he said, Beth, I had just gotten licensed like a month before with my law license. And he said, I've got a little real estate deal. I put up a few $1,000s down, tied up like 300 acres of land and on Lake Travis in Austin. And I was like, wow, for $5,000. And sure enough, he goes, I got a few meetings that we got to do with the city. Maybe you can come help me out with that for a few weeks. Well, 8 years later, we got done with that project. So we were a little off on the 3 weeks, but it taught me a lot about land development. So I got a strong background in real estate and land development. And then I ended up working just in the law and doing my own business and as a general counsel kind of for businesses, which I highly recommend. It's actually kind of a good way to do law. You don't have to be in the courtroom. You can just kind of do business, bring parties together. And so that's kind of where I fall on the law side in everything that I've done. My pathways to peace involvement came as a side thing. I've always enjoyed human rights, and that it was a premier organization. This was a anti-genocide and genocide prevention organization, and so our job was to build political will in our communities to prevent and end genocide. We did that through a variety of things like, everything from education, a lot of lobbying. There's nothing I like more than to stick it to the man and tell him, how we feel about things. And I've taught that along the way. Also, I've taught in a lot of schools and presented and stuff like that. So that was kind of where I fell in that, and during that time, in that venture. And I married a scientist. He's an inventor. He's a crazy science guy. Steve McDaniel. He's a lawyer, a patent lawyer as well. And we started a company. When I met him, he was starting this company, and where the company was the merger of two scientific disciplines, biotechnology and material science, which in the material science was paint, and then we're in the paint business. And it came about in kind of a strange way. We can talk about it or not, but basically that had not really been done in the paint and coatings industry before, because generally the idea is to keep biologicals out of your paint because they cause degradation. And so we kind of turned that notion on its head, and we started putting functional biomolecules into paints and coatings to derive some sort of functionality so that the paint or the coating would respond to its environment in some way that we wanted it to. And so that was the genesis of that company. And then we ended up coming up with a climate change solution that's based in paint as well.
Okay, so you have developed a special paint that can remove carbon directly from the air. Could you give us a little background on how that works?
Yeah. So like I said before, what are just big context, just to give you your listeners the context of what we're talking about, because no one really ever thinks about paints and coatings very much. In fact, you just kind of take it for granted. I always say it's the biggest industry that no one's really ever thought about, but it's ubiquitous, okay? And everything, like if you look around you right now, paint, everything that's man-made, and it's sometime in its manufacturing process has a coating on it, usually to protect it. Other coatings are for aesthetics, the coatings on your walls, give it color or whatever, but everything that's man-made has a coating on it. So the walls behind you, but the windows and your computer screen and your shirt and your eyeglasses and everything that you see around you pretty much has a coating. Well, that's a lot of surface area. And when you think about functionalizing surface area to work for you, that's one of the benefits that we have with paint. Paint is lightweight. It adheres well to surfaces. You can use it vertically. And so we can take advantage of a lot of surface area to add this functionality. And using biologicals, there's other functional paints in the paint and coatings industry, okay? I mean, Sherwin-Williams has an antimicrobial paint, but usually these are using heavy metals or something else that might be questioned for its, toxicity or environmental, effect. And so by using naturally occurring non-toxic biomolecules, you avoid that problem of it, okay? That problem with functional coatings. So what we've used up until now is biomolecules, things like enzymes and peptides. For instance, an enzyme that we know of that's functional in nature, that's doing this all the time, all over us, is called a lipase, and it's breaking down greases, fats, and oils in nature. So that's not our art. Our art is to take that and embody that into a coating system and ask it to do what it does in nature, but in that coating system. And so therefore, when you spread it on a surface, then you've got a self-cleaning surface that's going to as long as the coating system is there. See, we can stabilize that enzyme, which is kind of, again, that was what we did. That was kind of turned things on its head, is we can stabilize that enzyme and it will continue being enzymatic within the coating as long as the coating is there. And so it's going to continue breaking down greases, fats, and oils. If you cooked your countertop was coated with that coating, and you cooked, fried chicken or you stir fried vegetables or whatever, and you left that mess until the morning, what you would find is it would be broken down into its component parts, and you could wipe it away with just a wet cloth. Okay, it's no longer oily.
Okay.
And so we have different platform technologies in which we've used these biomolecules to derive some sort of functionality. That's one of them. Another one is a whole library of peptides that have all sorts of antimicrobial effects. And we found it also during COVID. We did some high level testing on those for antiviral activity, and they are also antiviral and with regard to enveloped viruses like COVID. And so
could have good uses in hospitals and such things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so there's a lot of different industries that could, pick off of this technology and applications and stuff. We don't really dictate that. Usually we deal kind of with paint companies that need to have some sort of functionality in their coating system, and we help them innovate that. But then when we were hit with the urgency in the news, like in about 2018 in fact, I know it was October of 2018 was when one of the UN's reports came out that was especially grim about
the IPCC report.
Mm-hmm. One of them, but that was one of the first ones that really grabbed everyone's attention. And I mean, my husband was practically comatose after he read it, and I'm not laughing about it. It was scary. It was the first time that we got really, really scared about climate change. And after about a week, he kind of emerged and said, I've been thinking about something, about innovation for quite some time, and I think we need to direct our resources towards that. And that is not putting a biomolecule into a paint or coating, but instead putting a live organism, a single cell bacteria, which is cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, into a coating system and asking that to do what it does in nature, which is photosynthesize, of course, pulling down CO2 in that process and releasing, with the help of sunlight and water, releasing oxygen and glucose. And so that's where we went with it. And so now over the last 5 years, we've developed a paint that effectively and efficiently pulls down CO2.
So this paint, does it just come in a normal paint jar? You can slap it onto your window, onto your walls, and coat your house with this if you wanted to?
Okay, good question. And it's always the first question that people ask. And so, and that is, we will get there probably, but it's not the highest and best use right now to use it in that way. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all, algae naturally grows in certain areas, in certain environments. Okay. When we can control that environment, then we can get a lot more algae growth. And the more growth, the more photosynthesis is taking place. So paint on the outside of a wall is a different animal kind of. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to develop a system of modules where they would be densely packed with painted sheets, that we would get a whole bunch of surface area within each module to do as much work of photosynthesis as possible. And then we just have a modular system. You can stack them up, you can lay them out flat. So that's the system that we've developed so far that we really want to go through, because we think it'll be a lot more effective.
So it's like a dedicated facility of algae covered surfaces, effectively.
Yeah. It's cool looking. It's like living walls.
So you're actually using artificial surfaces, painting algae paint on it, and having them turn blue-green.
Right. And the paint itself is all non-toxic. So we use things in our paint that, where algae like to live. And these are things that you'd find in the grocery store that you might have eaten this morning with your breakfast. Okay. And so they are, it's totally non-toxic. And we do that obviously for a reason, because whatever solutions we come up with, we don't want to cause a lot of damage in doing so. And so that is, that's the nature of it.
in terms of what this does, these algae photosynthesize. So you expose them, you put them on these sheets, they're exposed to sunlight, they grow, they suck in carbon dioxide from the air. So I can see this happening, but now you're going to end up with sheets and sheets of algae, and eventually they're going to be saturated, or they're going to stop being useful for removing carbon dioxide. So how do you sequester the carbon or keep it from these, when these things die, presumably they will rot and release the CO2 back into the atmosphere. So what do you do?
Yeah. So what I've described thus far is just kind of the capture side of it rather than the permanent sequestration. So so we have a cradle to grave system. And if you go on our website, you can see this video, and it shows you how that goes. But anyway, once the algae, so we're monitoring this, each unit, each module all the time. Okay. We're just building our first field units. Okay. So this is where we've been doing this in the lab for years. Okay. So we'll monitor a module, and we can see exactly molecule by molecule how much CO2 has gone down, what the oxygen level is. I mean, we can monitor a lot of different things about that environment. And so we know the rate of photosynthesis and when is the best time to harvest. And so there is a harvesting procedure that takes place. And that harvesting is done via a chemical reaction. We use what's called a chelator, and subject the algal biomass. So the algal biomass has grown up in the paint. So you have a green biomass coating system. And we say, I'm using coating system loosely in the way it doesn't look like the paint that you would put on your wall. Okay, it looks different. It's more of jelly kind of looking, but it dries, and it does what coatings do. And once this is subjected to this chelator, all the components fall apart. It's designed to do this. We designed it so that it would fall apart when we asked it to, into its component parts. So you'd have the paint, the water, and the algal biomass, which contains the CO2. And so the paint and the water are then used to recycle into the next phase and do it again as much as we can. We take the algal biomass, and that's what's going to be used we're going to sequester that. It can be sequestered in a variety of ways. A lot of people talk about pumping that kind of stuff down, injecting it deep into the ground, like 1 or 2 miles down in the ground. We don't need to do that. What we plan to do is more on the biochar level. And so are you familiar with biochar, Al?
Not really. I understand the idea. You're burning it and you're making soot, basically.
Yeah, or like charcoal briquettes. It's burning without oxygen. It kind of fuels itself. The system fuels itself because it also creates bio-oil and syngas in the system. And then it biochars as well. And so, and it's a known form of sequestration. And then it's also a valuable byproduct that can be used as a soil amendment to help soils, like you spread it on soils and it helps them absorb water. So it makes for even better carbon sinks. It's very circular. We like the idea of that. And yeah, so that's the grave part of it. That's the carbon removal sequestration end.
I looked at, there's a paper that was referenced on your website on the work, and you're one of the co-authors of that paper. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Showing capture efficiency projections of a large facility using your paint to capture carbon dioxide, and the numbers range from maybe a 22% to a best case of about 49% efficiency in terms of the carbon capture efficiency of the system. Now this is much better than numbers I've seen for more energy intensive direct air capture, just using fans and physical processes to try to separate CO2 from air. Because it's 400 parts per million. There's not a lot of it. You need to pump a lot of air through to get this out. How does this system compare to other options for removing carbon dioxide in terms of state of the art? I've recently, just yesterday, I think I saw an article on an Elon Musk funded idea that captures CO2 chemically from the ocean, where it's more concentrated, and so it doesn't have to flow so much air through it just flows a little bit of water through it and gets the CO2 that way. So can you just talk about how this compares to other options?
Yeah, sure. So there's a ocean embodiment for this technology too, that's actually how we plan to scale up to a gigaton level. And it's really important, the ability to scale up, as you probably know. If we can't get to gigaton, billion ton, then we're not doing enough for the problem. We're just kind of spinning our wheels. But yeah, we have an ocean embodiment planned. We've been testing it, but we haven't laid it out completely. We don't have a field unit on that. But as far as the competition in carbon removal, there's some really good innovation out there. Most of it, though, if you're comparing it, you have to compare different things. Each one of them has a boundary drawn around it for its life cycle analysis and its techno-economic analysis, okay? So it's based on one scenario. That scenario, for instance, might or might not include the grave part of the cradle to grave, okay? Some of them just include the capture part. So you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and really look when you're comparing, make sure you're comparing apples to apples. The biggest problem with the biggest issue or challenge with all of these technologies is the energy and where you're going to get the energy. So, for instance, Climeworks, who is probably the farthest along on their technology for carbon removal, they're based in Iceland, and they use geothermal heat from a geyser. So they're next to a geyser, so they're getting free waste heat. Is the deal. We can use free waste heat too in our situation. And what that does is allows us to stack modules up. Okay. So our system just becomes a lot denser and a lot more efficient but the paper that you referenced, which is a peer reviewed in the peer reviewed journal of CO2 utilization, the system boundaries of that was just a solar only system. Which is what's required for Elon Musk's Xprize. We're Team Lycan at Elon Musk's $100 million carbon removal Xprize. And so that's the system boundary for that paper was just a solar embodiment. But we could also use ours, for instance, to capture point source emissions from an industrial emitter that we could pump that in. And like you recognized, 415 or 420 parts per million is hard to capture direct air. But if you're pumping it in, and I'll tell you what algae really love is CO2. I mean, then our system just starts really moving faster. So it's a great thing to pump it in, and so we also have that commercial embodiment as well planned.
I see. And so you've made this environment for the cyanobacteria to live in that they like. You've had some water and I don't know, you actually put the cells into the paint, I guess.
And we do a lot of stuff with paint to make it amenable to that. Yeah. So we work with paint, we modify the paint as well.
And it's durable. Does it hold up? Like, will it run down the wall, or is it going to stay on?
Nope. And that's what I meant by saying it doesn't look like your average paint, but it has the same characteristics that paint need to be in order to be paint. They have to adhere well. They have to stay, go on vertical surfaces. So yes, you could put it on the top of a 100-story building. It's not going to just fall off. It's got the qualities of paint.
As long as you don't mind it being blue-green. So now I know you're not a scientist. You're the the legal representation for this company, but I just want to ask a question. You mentioned that the paint itself is non-toxic, and you've been working on non-toxic ingredients. But isn't cyanobacteria kind of bad stuff for toxicity?
Oh, I wouldn't eat it. Well, no, probably do eat it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, you're kind of asking the wrong person, but yeah, I mean, if algae is growing up in algal blooms or something like that, then yes, it can be, there can be some toxicity to that. What paint does in this situation is it holds on to the algae. It doesn't let the algae overgrow into a bloom. Okay. And so in fact, it's interesting, Al, this paint we copy nature all the time. We're little copycats. Okay. So when Steve, my husband, came up with this idea, it was based on another organism in nature called a lichen. That's why we call it Team Lichen. And, seen lichen when you've gone hiking or whatever. It's colorful, all different colors. You can barely scrape it off a rock. It adheres well. And when he was doing a scientific mission in the Arctic one time, he saw this big red spot on a rock. And he was like, that must be a geo marker or something like that. And when he got closer to it, he realized it was algae. And he realized it was lichen. Lichen is composed of two things, an algae and a fungus. The algae do what algae do. They photosynthesize. The fungus controls the algae from overgrowing and provides it the necessary things to live. In fact, some lichen are like 1,000 years old. But it controls like gas exchange and it allows sunlight in that it needs, but not too much UV that would dry it out. And so all of this stuff that the fungus does for the algae, our paint is like the fungus, and it's doing that for the algae.
Interesting. So you've come up with this idea. You're rolling it out to the prototype stage now. Are you still in the running for the Xprize? How's the competition looking?
I haven't checked lately. Keep in mind the best carbon removal system we have out there right now, commercially available, meaning the farthest along, is probably Climeworks. They're pulling down 4,000 tons a year right now. We need to be pulling down 2 to 10 billion tons a year by 2030, according to the UN. So way off mark.
We're a few orders of magnitude behind.
Yeah. And exactly. So I'm hoping there's some really good technologies out there. We consider anyone that's in this, work, colleagues rather than competitors, because we're all working on this together. And I think there's some really good ocean solutions. We agree with you. In our ocean solution as well, we would have an embodiment that would be pulling CO2 both from there and the ocean. So we think we could get a lot more efficacy, and you're absolutely right about the ocean having a lot of CO2. And, once we go over 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels, like the UN has been warning about, which we just heard is going to happen by 2027, the reefs start dying and all that. So we need to make, I'm really encouraged by some of the ocean technologies, and we hope to be one of those as well.
Okay, very good. So, you've identified, I think, the real problem with all of these technologies is that they're still quite early stage, and to scale them up to the gigaton level requires a lot of money. And so the question is the expensiveness of scaling to industrial sizes. And I think that the industry target that I've seen quoted is $100 per ton of CO2. And your paper, I think, was quoting an estimate for the solar facility of $702 to $1,585 per ton of CO2. So you've got a long ways to go. What can you get to $100 per ton?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to get on my soapbox just for a minute about that. Okay. Because there ain't nobody that's pulling down CO2 and sequestering it for $100. It's not happening. And if anyone says, well, okay, so there's carbon engineering. They do a good job at pulling down CO2, but they're using it for enhanced oil recovery. And so that is not a net negative process. So any carbon removal technology has to be net negative in order to be relevant as a carbon removal technology. Otherwise, it's just carbon capture and utilization for something else. And so there is not a technology. If you look at Climeworks, which is a direct air capture technology, they're selling on their website, they're selling offsets for like $1,200. No one is doing it at $100. So, and I researched, it was just so annoying to me that everyone, was holding us up to a standard that no one's ever achieved. And so why is that the standard? And I looked to see, where was this figure? I researched, where was this figure established, this $100 a ton? Well, what that is if you went out on the open market to buy carbon dioxide for your Coke to make a soda, that's what you'd pay for carbon dioxide. That's where they got the $100 figure. It's not apples to apples, and it's frankly a stupid figure to consider because it's not based on anything out there. Not you aren't stupid. Everyone thinks it's supposed to be $100, and so that is something that we fight all the time. It's just that if you hold yourself to that standard, no one would ever invest in a carbon removal technology.
So wait a minute, you can actually buy carbon dioxide cylinders for $100 per ton right now?
That's where I read that the price was based on. I didn't see it. I
So we
didn't
should
get
use
into
what they're using, shouldn't we?
Yeah, right. Put that underground.
I mean, that's basically direct air capture, I think, from, for welding gases or, liquid oxygen and that sort of thing. So I assume it's a byproduct of a different industrial process in that case, but I'm not sure exactly how it gets done. So I know there are claims. I was reading this Elon Musk funded thing. They're saying, oh, we can do it for $100 a ton because we're in the water. How much better does your process get in the water in terms of the concentrated CO2 there?
I wish I could answer that. I just don't have that information, and I don't want to give your listeners anything false. I mean, we're just starting to test it in seawater and going through that whole scientific process for that. So I wish I just don't have it, but I think we think it's going to be as good, or we think it's going to be better from what the empirical evidence we have so far would suggest that. And if I might, I'm sorry to jump in, Al, but there was something you said at the beginning, and I just feel compelled, and it's my fault because I think someone on our end got it wrong, but they said something about turning carbon dioxide into hydrogen. We don't do that. It's not that. We do have a process for using the system that we've developed to pull down CO2, to pull other atmospheric gases down. And we have done that in the lab, where we've pulled down other atmospheric gases that could be converted, not nitrogen specifically, that could be converted from ammonia to hydrogen. So yeah, that system could be used to do other gases as well.
So you have a different biological pathway for doing that? Is that what you're looking at?
It's different algae. See, that's the cool thing about the system, is that you just change out the algae to get something else. And so we change out the algae if we want to. We've used different kinds of algae. We've used an algae that that was modified to overproduce cellulose, and that could be used for building materials or whatever. So there's different ways of going about it. I would check, on those other technologies. I'd look at their system boundary to see exactly what they're talking about. Look, our numbers will come down also once we, have more efficiencies and stuff. We expect those numbers to drop by about $300. So we think we're in the range, but it's legit, it's measurable, it's permanent. So I think we've got something that should be looked at.
What happens to the biochar? I mean, I'm not a biochar expert. Do you know what happens to it when it's in the soil? So it just stays there and it's just, physically inert effectively?
Yeah. It's known that the carbon stays in the biochar in excess of 100 years, but probably closer to thousands. But 100 is what they're kind of saying is permanent or durable sequestration.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying, I think you said the target of this technology is for how many billion tons a year that the IPCC is asking for in their roadmaps to the future of CO2? Is it like 100 billion tons a year, you said?
Oh, no, not that much. We're emitting through man-made processes. We're emitting 40 billion tons a year, or 37 billion to 40 billion tons a year. And so according to the UN, by 2030, we need to be pulling down between, and this is a big differential, but between 2 and 10 billion tons a year. But we're only at 4,000. And that what they're talking about is 10 billion net negative tons, okay? Not 10 billion, capturing 10 billion tons and then using that to make more oil, because that just doesn't get us on a net negative. That's just net zero.
Yeah, you need a net positive here. And I can see that how the cost would impact that. So if you're looking at, 10 billion tons of CO2 at $100 a ton, that's $1 trillion for the whole project, which is, not a small bit of cash. And if you're at, $500 a ton, then you're $5 trillion a year on expenditure. So I can see why the cost is very important for scaling of this. And, this is legit. IPCC is pushing for it. I know there are oil companies that are, trying to implement their own direct air capture of carbon dioxide, and the numbers for efficiency that I've seen published for their prototypes are 3%. So, it's basically a way to dry out oil and burn it faster because 97% of the extra oil that they're pulling out to capture CO2 from their current burning is not doing anything other than, treading water effectively. So I can see why they're going down that path. And so, stuff like this is definitely worth investigating. So I'm happy to see this interesting approach that you're providing for us. It's definitely something that I hadn't thought about. I don't know if it's going to catch on commercially for painting buildings or not.
I think it would, and I think we'll come up with that paint. But we want something that's just very divisive and very measurable and all that for industrial situations and just to really do most of the work. And we are you asked about the Xprize. The Xprize, the award will be, you have to prove in order to win the Xprize that you've actually captured and removed 1,000 tons of CO2 within a year. And the prize is going to be on Earth Day 2025. And I'm not really sure how the other technologies are doing. I mean, we're building our first facility that will start pulling down CO2 on a facility basis. But we plan to, we're going for the prize.
How's your work funded? Is this through donations, or is it fully commercially funded, or where is it coming from?
We are seeking funding right now. So far, it's been funded by us and our company. So yeah, we can't carry the weight of climate change on our backs for long, but we are doing whatever we can to move the ball forward. But once we get funding, it's just going to go, really fast. We've been in the paint business for 20 years, so we just really know how to work with paint. The paint is there, and the paint is only going to get better. But already, if we were watching a module right now during this entire podcast, then what you would see is it would have gone from about 420 down to about 50 during this time.
In a closed environment?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. That's quick. That's good. Can you actually see the paint change color, or can you see the algae in there?
Yeah, it gets darker as it grows, and it actually even weighs more. So there's the weight of it that can determine how much carbon is in there too.
So this is a really cool thing that you were doing. What's next for Beth McDaniel? Are you going to be working on this for a while yet to come, or you have any other ideas you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just I feel really blessed to have had the opportunity to work in human rights. That all gets, that all plays out in this whole thing. So that in what we do for our children and for our grandchildren and everything. And so, I think this is where I'm going for now, is just staying on this course, because we got to get this technology out there and others just like it that are going to, help provide us a reasonable place to live.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about your company and your technology, for spending your time and chatting with us. I'm going to send you a Rational View t-shirt.
Wow, thank you.
So thank you very much, Beth McDaniel.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like to follow up with more in-depth discussions, please come find us on Facebook at The Rational View and join our discussion group. If you like what you're hearing, please consider visiting my Patreon page at patron.podbean.com/therationalview. Thanks for listening.